He said what?
Harry and Meghan Markle's surrogacy scandal has entered the mainstream media domain.
It was a dreadful thing to do, and actually...
It started with a threat, cold, sharp, and unmistakable. Prince Harry, once the beloved soldier prince, now locked in a transatlantic war words, issued a warning.
Completely wrong. He is quite hard and harsh.
He became hypersensitive and blamed the media for the crashes of his relationship.
A legal warning to a royal biographer who dared speak his name. Angela Levin, seasoned royal correspondent, author, and outspoken critic, said something so piercing, so controversial, it sent shockwaves to the palace gates, and straight into the Sussex camp. But what exactly did she say? Why did it spark such fury in Harry? And more importantly, why now? Behind the glossy covers of royal books and polished interviews lies something far darker. A bitter feud over truth, image, and legacy. And at the heart of it all, a man torn between two worlds. One foot in royalty, the other in rebellion. So we ask, if Prince Harry has nothing to hide, why is he trying to silence the story? Face without mouth fog, once upon a time, they were the world's sweethearts, a charming prince, born to duty, forged by tragedy, and an American actress with a radiant smile and an unshakable spirit. Their wedding in 2018 was a spectacle of unity, modern, multicultural, magnetic. Billions watched as Meghan Markle joined the royal fold, promising a new era of inclusion and compassion. But behind the glittering tiaras and royal wave, tension was brewing. What came next was nothing short of seismic. In early 2020, Prince Harry and Meghan announced they were stepping back from royal duties, citing media intrusion, internal pressures, and a lack of support from within the firm. They didn't just leave the monarchy. They reinvented themselves. From palace corridors to primetime interviews, the Duke and Duchess of Sussex reemerged as bold truth-tellers, challenging royal traditions, exposing alleged injustices, and demanding space for their own narrative. To some, they were victims, to others, rebels. To many, a symbol of defiance in the face of centuries-old protocol. Enter Angela Levin, a veteran royal biographer. Levin has spent years studying, interviewing, and chronicling the lives of senior royals. She's walked the palace halls, looked Harry in the eye, and asked the questions few dared to. Her insights aren't tabloid speculation. They're born from proximity. So when she speaks, the world listens. And what she revealed recently wasn't just bold. It was incendiary. A statement so provocative, so personal, it sent Prince Harry's team scrambling to shut it down. But why? What truth was too dangerous to be spoken aloud? As the storm clouds gather and legal threats loom, one thing becomes chillingly clear. This isn't just about a single comment. It's about the battle for the true royal legacy. And the first cracks are beginning to show. The exit was dramatic, but the signs were there long before they ever boarded that flight to California. Prince Harry and Meghan Markle's slow retreat from royal life was a single act of rebellion. It was a series of quiet refusals, subtle shifts, and broken traditions that began raising eyebrows across the kingdom. It started with a baby. When Archie Harrison Mountbatten Windsor was born in May 2019, the royal family and the public expected familiar script. The iconic hospital steps, the photo call, the ceremonial easel outside Buckingham Palace. But that moment never came. Instead, there were no hospital photos, no immediate royal announcements. And when it came to his christening, no cameras, no public ceremony, not even the names of Archie's godparents. Silence where there had always been spectacle. The couple insisted they were protecting their child's privacy. Critics whispered about secrecy, control, and optics. And in the midst of it all, Angela Levin, a journalist with decades inside the royal circle, began to take note. She wasn't just any commentator. Angela had written an in-depth biography on Prince Harry after shadowing him for months. She'd interviewed him one-on-one, witnessed his vulnerability, his humor, his pain. She understood him, which made her observations all the more piercing. Levin began to question the Sussexes' growing pattern of withdrawal and contradiction, how they simultaneously craved privacy and pursued publicity. how they shunned royal protocol while still trading on royal prestige. As months turned to years, the public unease only deepened. Why were Harry and Meghan so guarded about details that had, for generations, been routine royal disclosures? Was it simply a desire for autonomy? Or was there something they didn't want the public to know? Speculation simmered. Was the secrecy a shield or a sign? Angela Levin didn't accuse. She observed. And in doing so, she gave voice to the questions so many were already quietly asking. But would be her latest remarks, candid, cutting, and broadcast of millions, that would push everything over the edge. The Sussexes had once retreated quietly. Now they were striking back, said what many had only dared to imply. There are legitimate questions about the parentage of Harry and Meghan's children, and their refusal to follow royal traditions only fuels those doubts. It wasn't shouted. It wasn't screamed. But it landed like a thunderclap. For years, whispers had swirled on the fringes of online forums and tabloids. But this was different. This was Angela Levin, a woman with credentials, connections, and credibility, voicing the question out loud. Why no delivery details? Why no hospital confirmation? Why the absolute refusal to name godparents when it had been royal tradition for centuries? Was it about control? Or was there something deeper, something the public wasn't meant to see? The reaction was immediate and explosive. The interview clip went viral in hours. YouTube channels dissected every word. Comment sections flooded with speculation, outrage, and for some, quiet validation. And from Montecito, _silence, Meghan and Harry's team issued no swift denial, no video rebuttal, no heartfelt letter to set the record straight, just legal threats. Sources close to the Sussexes hinted that Levin could face lawsuits if she continued to make dangerous insinuations, that any questioning of the children's legitimacy would be met with legal action. But the tone was telling. Where was the fiery passion we'd seen in past interviews? The righteous defense of truth? The promises of transparency? For a couple who had bared their souls to Oprah, told Netflix the world their truth, and written memoirs about being silenced. Why now were they silent? Prince Harry, once calm and collected in front of cameras, was reportedly furious. Friends described him as at his limit. But fury, when paired with secrecy, only adds fuel to the fire, and the public wasn't buying it. Critics called it hypocrisy. Supporters begged for clarity, and journalists, seasoned and independent, began to ask the same thing Angela had dared to voice. Because when tradition is broken and silence replaces openness, people fill in the blanks. Angela Levin had only said what millions were already wondering, and the Sussexes' response. At first, it was a flicker, a passing story, another twist in the ever-complicated saga of Harry and Meghan. But then it caught fire. Prince Harry's legal team sent a message. Angela Levin's remarks were deeply offensive, factually baseless, and potentially actionable under defamation law. But what they didn't send was an answer. And in the modern age, silence doesn't calm suspicion. It amplifies it. Because if there's nothing to hide, why not just say so? In days, what began as a controversy became a media storm. From glossy breakfast shows to hardline political panels, commentators and analysts began to ask the same uncomfortable question. Why the secrecy? Levin's words, once seen as provocative, began to sound prophetic. Online forums, royal watchers, even former palace aides weighed in. Not all endorsed the theory, but almost all agreed Harry's legal fury had backfired. Instead of extinguishing the fire, he poured gasoline on it. Soon, headlines weren't just reporting on Levin. They were asking questions she had raised. Not in whispers, but bold font. Public has right to know. Sussex transparency called into question. Legal silence or cover-up. And at the heart of the blaze, a single haunting dilemma. DNA, a simple test. A scientific confirmation. One answer. And the rumors would vanish overnight. And yet it never came. Some called the request invasive, cruel, even conspiratorial. But others asked, isn't this what Harry and Meghan claimed to want? Truth? Clarity? Justice? Instead, we saw something else entirely. As the pressure mounted, Meghan disappeared from public view. No statements, no social media, no polished interviews or glossy podcast episodes. Just stillness, the woman who once captivated the world with her voice. Now notably silent, and that silence spoke volumes. Because this wasn't just about DNA or tradition anymore. It was about trust. For years, Harry and Meghan had crafted an image. Outspoken, victimized, brave. They had positioned themselves as survivors of a rigid system. Exposing, healing, evolving. But now that narrative was unraveling. With each unanswered question, each threat of litigation, each defensive move, they weren't seen as victims anymore. They were seen as protectors of a crumbling truth. And as the public watched this once golden couple recoil into silence and strategy, the shift was unmistakable. Curiosity had curdled into suspicion. Admiration had turned into skepticism. And the fairy tale had morphed into a modern tragedy. Because when you claim to stand for truth, but fight tooth and nail to suppress the questions, the story doesn't die. It haunts. And now, the world wasn't just asking what Angela Levin said. They were asking why Harry and Meghan had worked so hard to shut her down. In the quiet after the storm came the reckoning. Prince Harry and Meghan Markle, once the darlings of the media, the fresh faces of modern monarchy, are now navigating a cold and unfamiliar reality. The backlash wasn't loud. It was subtle, surgical, and devastating. Major media partners began to pull back. Spotify, once their golden platform, ended its deal with the couple. Netflix, after the initial buzz of their docuseries, grew eerily silent. No new project announced. No glowing trailers. Just distance. Brand Sussex, once built on vulnerability, courage, and the promise of truth, now faced a trust deficit it couldn't shake. And the signs weren't just in boardrooms. They were everywhere. When their wedding anniversary quietly passed this year, there were no tributes from the royal family, no warm social media messages, no official posts, not even a photograph reshared. Silence, once again, became the loudest message. Public sentiment, too, began to shift. Polls showed a steep drop in support, even among former loyalists. In the UK, skepticism hardened. In the US, once a haven of sympathy, audiences began to disengage. Podcasts flopped. Book sales dipped. Influence waned. Because at the heart of royalty, modern or traditional, lies one irreplaceable currency: trust. And in the aftermath of Angela Levin's claim, that currency had been spent. But the damage didn't stop with Harry and Meghan. The ripples reached the monarchy itself. Questions, once reserved for online fringes, began to surface in mainstream discussion. If there are doubts about the legitimacy or transparency surrounding the Sussex children, what does that mean for the line of succession? Are Archie and Lilibet's places secure? Would the crown address the speculation or ignore it and risk seeming complicit? This was no longer just about hurt feelings or privacy. It was about legacy. And for an institution that survives on ritual and lineage, these whispers are more than gossip. They are existential. And yet, amidst all the fallout, Angela Levin stood firm. She didn't apologize. She didn't retract. She clarified firmly that she wasn't making accusations, but observations rooted in real inconsistencies. And while Harry's team threw legal threats, Levin's credibility grew. Media outlets defended her. Other royal correspondents backed her. To many, she had become the voice that broke the silence, a journalist asking the uncomfortable questions and refusing to be silenced by fear. Because beneath the tabloid headlines and Twitter storms, this moment exposed something much deeper, a fracture in the royal story. The public no longer accepts silence as dignity. They no longer see tradition as an excuse for secrecy. We live in an age where authenticity is the only throne worth sitting on. And so the world watches not just the next headline, but for answers, real ones, transparent ones. Because if even royalty can't be honest about the most fundamental truths, what then do they really stand for? Angela Levin lit the match, but it was a silence that made it burn in a world where everything is filmed, filtered, and fact-checked in real time. Truth is no longer something you simply claim. It's something you prove. That was the promise Harry and Meghan once made to the world, that they would tell the truth, their truth, and in doing so, break centuries of silence. But now, as legal letters replace honesty and silence takes the place of courage, one can't help but wonder, has Harry become the very thing he claimed to hate? A man who once accused the press of distortion now lashes out when questioned. A prince who begged for transparency now hides behind legal walls. A father who said he was protecting his children, but won't offer clarity about the very details that sparked doubt. And Meghan, her silence is deafening. Is it a calculated strategy to let the storm pass? A quiet retreat from a war she no longer wants to fight? Or is it a statement in itself? Because sometimes silence isn't strength. Sometimes silence is complicity. What began as a fairy tale of modern love and revolution has now become a slow unraveling of the very ideals they once claimed to champion. The tragedy is not just personal, it's institutional. Because when heirs to the crown reject scrutiny, when their story is built on secrecy instead of service, it forces us to ask, can the monarchy survive when its future runs from the truth? That question doesn't end with Harry and Meghan. It stretches back through generations, to Diana, to Edward VIII, to every royal who's ever stood at the crossroads of duty and self. But in today's world, where every secret eventually sees the light, the choice is simple. Tell the truth, or be consumed by the suspicion you tried to avoid. Because legacy is not written by titles. It's written by actions. And in this chapter of the royal story, the pen is still hovering over the page, waiting